So I think sandbags are one of the most underrated tools that you can use to work on your fitness and conditioning. Okay, it's just simple work, simple grunt work, hard work. So why are they so good? Let's clear up a few things first. If your goal is hypertrophy, if you're a bodybuilder, this is definitely not the best tool for you. There are other things you can do, and there are other better uses of your time. So who is this a good tool for? I say for the most part, well, there's CrossFitters. I mean, CrossFit I think is one of the ones that popularized them the most. They've done that for a bunch of sports. But besides CrossFitters, I say grapplers in general, tactical athletes, so firemen, special forces, police officers, first responders, and of course, strongmen in general. And another type of athlete that I know from experience that do not receive much exposure to this type of training is contact athletes in general. I think the use of strongman endurance and things like sandbags can provide huge benefits for these type of athletes because of how lively of an object it is. It is a very tough object to handle, and oftentimes we hit a lot of those stabilizing and posture muscles that sometimes get neglected, especially when we're dealing with repetitive motions and the imbalances that come from them. Now, why are they so good? Let's look at muscle fiber types for a second. If you were brought up in sports, you probably were told that there's two types of fiber muscles. You have slow twitch and fast twitch. You might have been told there's three types: slow twitch, type 1, fast twitch, type 2B or 2X, and then there's a middle ground, like a hybrid that sits in the middle, 2A. Well, according to research from Dr. Andrew Galpin, we now are looking at having possibly 5 types of muscle fiber types. And all we're doing now is adding 2 more hybrids to the equation that they sit in the middle. And this creates, and I quote, a robust slow to fast continuum for muscle fiber types. Now, the absolute strictly fast twitch muscle fibers are actually quite rare, representing anywhere from 0 to 2% of the overall muscle fiber content for most people. And also, according to the latest research, it's possible for them to be mislabeled depending on what type of procedures used to determine muscle fiber types while in the lab. We know with a certain high degree of certainty that we cannot really change the composition and functionality of the fiber types in the extremes. But it seems like the ones in the middle are very receptive to training stimulus. And this has been proven in the research. There's a couple pretty interesting papers that I'm going to link below, looking at a pair of identical twins and looking at a group of elite Olympic weightlifters. A pair of twins had vastly different training habits. You know, when they were brought into the lab, they were 52 years old. One of them was an ultra endurance runner, and the other one had a pretty sedentary lifestyle. He was just a truck driver. As you might expect, the one with the endurance background had mostly slow twitch. Meanwhile, the other brother had what's considered to be a healthier split of slow twitch and fast twitch muscle fibers. Also, we have the example for the Olympic weightlifter group. Now, what's interesting here is that all of these participants had higher than normal concentration of fast twitch fiber muscles, which explains why they were so good at the sport of Olympic weightlifting. But the more veteran ones had an even higher concentration of fast twitch fiber muscles, suggesting that a long-term exposure to resistance training resulted in even higher concentrations of fast twitch fiber muscles. Why is all this important? Well, I think that every time we bring in new implements and new routines into our training habits, we need to understand what's the purpose behind using those things, what we can expect from using them, and how we should use them. Because we do have this middle ground of hybrid muscle fiber types, we can in fact work in something that might be a little bit counterintuitive at first. And this is the power capabilities of our slow twitch fiber muscles and the oxidative or the endurance capabilities of our fast twitch fiber muscles. In other words, we can train to become better at producing higher rates of power for longer. Oftentimes in sports, it's not the fastest one that wins, it's not the most conditioned one that wins, it's the one that can produce the most power for the longest, that will outlast all of its competitors. And this is the hidden benefit of strongman fitness. They sort of hit this magic middle ground where the weights are heavy enough so that we can actually recruit the higher threshold motor units, but not heavy enough so that we're failing, okay? And we can actually accrue more reps and do more work without having to veer away from aerobic processes for energy production. In other words, they're a very good way of recruiting the higher motor threshold units without having to stop doing aerobic work. In addition to this, I like using sandbags because they're cheap and more easily available. They come in all sorts of sizes and weights, as opposed to like the more specific type of implements like jokes, stones, barrels, and specialty bars. They work on grip and coordination, and also we can work on some of the posture and more stabilizing muscles that oftentimes can get neglected with implements that are easier to control once you get a good handle on them, like barbells, dumbbells, and kettlebells. Now, you can certainly use sandbags to get stronger, but I think the barbell just lends itself to be much easier to progressively overload and work in strength specifically. I think where sandbags really shine is in conditioning-oriented protocols. They can be great for carries, holds, and I like them for cleans quite a bit because I think they teach important lessons about the conservation of momentum as you push this heavy thing over your shoulder. You know, I've seen some of my better athletes struggle to get this thing off the ground and over the shoulder in one sweep motion. So let's go over the technique for a second. Let's go over a sandbag clean. The way I want you to think about a sandbag clean is pretty similar as you would think about a barbell clean. You're gonna go through this first position with a good grip on the bag. You're gonna focus on pushing against the ground as hard as possible. We're gonna go through this first pull into a power position. At this point, your heels should still be on the ground and you should be focusing on keeping that bag as close as possible to your body. If you have the right proportions, you might be able to keep your arms straight. I have to bend them right here. This might be a little more exaggerated than you should have it, but keep that in mind. You wanna get a good pop off your hip, and for that, you need to keep the bag close. Finally, the final extension movement is supposed to be an upwards movement. We want to avoid overarching. A little bit of an arch is fine, and sometimes when I get tired, I also have a bit more of an arch. It's not as critical with this object as it is with a barbell, so we do have a little bit more leeway. This is a much heavier bag right here, and as you can see, the movement should stay pretty similar. We're gonna go over a few more reps. The last thing I want to talk about is the grip on the bag. As you're gonna see here soon, I like to alternate the grips. And for heavier bags, it's actually kind of hard to get under them properly. So what I like to do is I roll them over the hand that's gonna go on the bottom. And then I just alternate hands. I think this makes for a much better grip on the bag every single time. Lastly, I think they're a great transition tool when we move from postseason to preseason because they're a different stimulus. It's a much more lively object. So early in the postseason, I like using barbells because like I said, they're easy to progressively overload and they're better for strength development. But as we move closer to the season, I tend to veer our focus into things like sandbags. You know, I think they're a much more similar stimulus to what you will encounter in competition. So the closer we get to preseason and maybe into preseason, like, yes, sandbags are gonna take a more center role in our training, as opposed to barbells and cleans and snatches and just more like traditional training methods. EMOMs are a great way of applying it to your training. You can do singles, doubles, triples with some heavier bags for 10 minutes. Be careful with how much volume you accrue because they can cause a lot of soreness. So take it easy at first and have fun. You can get creative with this, and I think they're an amazing tool to have. And they're pretty cheap too. You can pick them up for like $60 on Amazon. You can also do circuit style training, throwing them in there in between other movements, squats, carries, all sorts of things. Just make sure your heart rate is not spiking throughout the whole thing and you're trying to maintain an even keel effort. So if you've never tried them, give them a shot, buy one, or have maybe your gym has one that you've never touched. I think they're an amazing tool. For the longest time, it was the only thing I had. I think I spent like 3-4 months with nothing but a sandbag to work out with. Back in those days, I was working out in the soils lab of my company. I would just clean the lab after everybody left and I'd stay there for like an hour. And yeah, you can overdo them. I remember doing 20-minute EMOMs of 4 flips every minute on the minute with a 150-pound bag. And when I was driving home, I could feel my back just tingling. And yeah, so be careful, but have fun and go hard, like I always say. And that's the video for this week. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, got something out of it. If you've never tried sandbags, give them a shot. If you're interested in a program for the off season or just to put up some numbers and still stay athletic for sports, I have a bulking for athletes program and we do use sandbags in there. So pick it up at the link below if you want to. And if you don't have 12 weeks to run through the program, it's 14 weeks long, but you can skip the first week if you know your numbers, and you can skip the last week. Just be smart about what you do after, because it's a pretty tough program. But if you don't have enough time and you buy the program, just reach out to me and I'll help you adjust it, the intensities and everything to make it fit for 8 weeks, whatever you need. And yeah, thanks for watching.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.